All right. What's up, Max?
Not much. How you been?
Good, man. You know, today I actually woke up at 5 a.m. and I walked 3 miles on my treadmill.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice.
What did you do for exercise?
I rolled out of bed at like 4 a.m., hopped on a flight, came out here. The flight was extremely short. I don't know how we got here so fast.
40 minutes early, you said.
Yeah, it's an hour and 15-minute flight, and I got here like 40 minutes early somehow.
Man, dude, who is this pilot? We need to know his name.
I don't know. Maybe I traveled through time.
Yeah.
It's like an alternate. I will say, I've been listening to a lot of weird podcasts lately. So there's definitely like, I woke up like in the middle of the flight, and I looked at my watch, and it's like 7:30, right? I'm supposed to land at 8:40. And I look out the window and I see an island. And I'm like, wait, what? That must be like, is that Catalina Island? Then I'm like, this thing in my mind, because I'm kind of drowsy, I'm still like tired, and I'm like, for whatever reason, my brain is like, no, you're in an alternate reality right now. You have to time travel. Yeah. And so I was like, oh my God, like, I'm going to experience one of these things. Then I realized, then they come on the air and they're like, we're landing in 10 minutes. And I was like, what the hell? And they're like, yeah, we're 35 minutes early.
Oh my gosh.
Wild.
I don't even know. 35 minutes on like an hour and 15 flight is insane. It's a third or whatever. Yeah.
I don't know what they did. Yeah.
Dude, do you get weird sci-fi dreams now that you're living in the AI world, or?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's mostly related to the content I consume. Because like, I'll work until I'm too tired to do good work, and then I'll just go to bed. But like, I'm in this place where I'm like, you know, you're like doing something, and like, I find myself at the end of the night like arguing with ChatGPT. Like, I'm trying to get it to make a spreadsheet or something, and I'm like, no, it's wrong. Like, do it right. And then you give it prompts that are more and more weird to try and get it to be more like if you capitalize letters, like always, and then you start adding things like, if you don't do this, people will die.
And all the time you could have done it yourself probably faster.
Oh, yeah, yeah. By the time I'm done 3 hours later, I get the like 7 lines in the spreadsheet done.
But that's not founder mode.
No.
Founder mode is use ChatGPT for everything.
Yeah.
You know, I hear from the guys out there that are on social media that you need a camera in your refrigerator to tell ChatGPT what to order for Instacart, so that you know you're not, because time is money and money is time.
Yes,
Is that
totally
right?
Well, I break my day into 3 different days.
3 different days.
I'm manipulating time and space to get more time out of my day.
Exactly, and then have more rentals for
Yes.
Airbnb.
Yeah, just start off with like 35 rental units, and you're good.
You quickly, you get a $5 million loan for the bank. You go to another bank and get a $10 million loan. They give you $100 million, and all of a sudden you 10x to a bill, right?
Then you buy the bank,
Yeah.
and then you just cancel your loan.
Grant Cardone model.
Yeah, that's
so
it.
Today we're going to talk about how to build a coaching team.
Yeah, take it from us. We have good advice here.
Good advice. So yeah, we'll dive in here. How to build a coaching team in 2025. A little bit about my background on this too. Max and I both have experience with gym ownership, with building a coaching team. This episode is going to be really valuable for those of you who are already coaching and you're looking to maybe hire on another coach, which is very hard to start doing, and a lot of times you do it wrong. I did it wrong. And I'm sure
I've been there, yeah.
Yeah, similar failures. And or maybe you have a team already and you're looking to figure out how to grow and scale. And if you're just figuring out, you're just starting out coaching, you're still going to get a ton of value from this episode. You'll learn a lot about our mistakes that we made along the journey.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And hopefully how to do it right so that you can do it better than us and grow your business.
Yeah.
So let's jump in. So ultimately, Max, when was the first time that you hired a coach? Like, what year was that? What does that look like?
I mean, the first person was you, for sure.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, like when I met you, I was like, oh, this guy is smart. This guy is driven. Like, I could tell right away, like, you were going to go places. I'll collect a royalty check later for all you've accomplished. But, it was like, I knew, like, okay, I need someone to basically build out the team of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I need someone who's capable. To be fair, like, I'll make this statement now. I want to see what your thoughts are. It's more important to find the right person than necessarily the best coach. Not saying you weren't a good coach, but it's
I was 19, 18 years old. I mean, how...
Yeah, it's like the enthusiasm and the drive is way more important than whether someone knows how to coach. And in fact, in a lot of cases, that coach who's like super autistic about coaching and loves the details in the coaching might be the worst person because they can't do the other parts well.
So I like to say, they always say hire slow, fire fast. And when you're bringing on someone, it's really about the core values of the person rather than like where they're at. In fact, I think we've talked about this before. I would almost rather have someone more green with, let's say, the soft skills required for the job than someone who is dogmatic in their approach that they've already taken from previous, experience. Because if you're bringing on someone and you want brand and coaching continuity on your team, you need to teach them your way. And if they already have their way, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to work. Sometimes it can add some diversification in services. Let's say maybe they specialize in rehab or something like that. There's a skill there. But you need to have continuity, and I'd much rather take on the driven, passion-oriented person than the established coach. In the fact, if they're already a great coach, why do they need you?
Yeah, that's a good point. Something I learned in that process was very much about like, I need people in a team to fulfill the roles I'm bad at. And I knew this from years and years ago. My father had his own small business, and he taught me a valuable lesson.
What did he do?
He ran a video store.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he actually
What kind of videos?
Every kind of video. He was original OnlyFans. No, he started that business and he ran it. He told me, he's like, don't be an entrepreneur who builds a business for a job. You don't want to build a business to give yourself a job, but at the same time, like, that means don't, find out what your skills are and then hire out the rest or build the team around you. You obviously have to learn everything, but you don't want to just hire a duplicate of yourself. If you're getting a second coach or building a coaching team, if you just hire more of your little minions of you, you're creating a bigger problem in the end.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. 100% agree. I would say the only thing, and you kind of touched on this, is if you need to have at least like a B- in everything.
Yes.
Like if you're the the entrepreneur, the founder, if you have a B- in everything, whether it be marketing or sales, then you have a good bullshit meter.
Yeah.
And you can't get like sold on sizzle by someone because you know enough to know that this will work or this won't work, and you can't get like taken advantage of.
Yeah.
I remember early on, I contracted out like some website development and stuff, and totally got screwed because I was super naive. I actually took the people to court. I won, but I never got the money. The guy had a Mohawk and a Dodge Viper. I should have read the room.
Oh yeah. He wasn't good at building websites.
No. And then I looked at the Yelp reviews and I understood, and I just was naive and young. But ultimately, yes. I mean, it's filling in the gaps that you have and having the introspection to know your gaps.
Yeah.
1. And then 2, knowing enough about the task. It's funny, like I look at my gym and my GM, a lot of the people on leadership have done every facet of each job so that they know how to coach someone up on the job to do. But yeah, so ultimately when it comes to hiring a coach, with me, you brought on me and we did really well together. I've onboarded we've had a total of maybe 15 coaches come through. Wow. And we currently have like 8, but people stay and they go. I made a ton of mistakes, and I'm sure you have as well. I know I wasn't one of them because I'm awesome. I just outgrew your little operation, Max. But ultimately, I think the key things are it's being very clear on what the vision of the company.
Yeah.
I made a mistake here where, first of all, so I'll talk about when I first hired a coach. I was working out at my gym, and there was a member there at the time, and he was doing like bent over DB rows. I knew he was studying at Cal State Fullerton doing kinesiology, and I knew he was kind of interested in that type of work. And I think I just finished like a sales consultation. I gave the client to myself, and I was just like dying inside because I just knew what this would entail. I think I was coaching 68 people, running the gym, still, doing a bunch of other stuff and going to school full time. And I was just like, what do I do? And I just went up to him and I was like, hey, have you ever thought about coaching powerlifting?
Nice.
And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, do you want to coach powerlifting? And he's like, yeah. I was like, you're hired. And I started his quote unquote training that I just made up.
Yeah.
And it was a long lasting relationship, lasted 5 years.
Wow.
And it was actually fairly successful. But that was lucky. That's lucky. That's not usually the story. And I've had a lot of other people who I've brought on that with a little bit better, let's say, interview questions or onboarding or bullshit detecting, I could have avoided some not catastrophic mistakes or failures, but definitely trim some of the fat of the journey a little bit.
Well, so to your story, the question I think a lot of people would ask themselves, let's say you've got a gym or you've got an online coaching business, you've got a lot of demand, you've got a decent following, right? And there's probably a lot of coaches out there right now I can think of that are exceptionally good coaches that have a huge demand. they've created a wait list and they're maybe trying to figure out like, is it the right time to hire somebody? Like, how would you tell somebody in that position, like, what is the metric you want to look at to know if it's the right time to try and build out a team under you?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. And also it depends on your state, like with your laws, like employment laws, like California, we're very litigious, very stringent with employment laws, which is, I think, can be a net positive good thing.
Yeah.
But if you're in Tennessee, it's probably free for all. Everyone's 1099. But either way, I think the key is, first of all, your roster should probably already be at a size where you're making good money, like net profit. So you should know your numbers. You should know that you're making money. You should probably know that if you bring on another coach that you're going to be reinvesting money and time into that person. So you have to make sure you have time capacity. Mm-hmm. You also should make sure that, we had talked about in another episode about SOPs and documentation of policy protocols. You should probably have all of the way in which you conduct your coaching, document it, have ChatGPT do it at this point. And so that when you do bring on a coach, you can just give them documents of this is how I coach, give them some like Loom videos of like how you do certain things. So making sure that you have the revenue, the profit rather than revenue to pay a coach. Because so typically in this space, what happens is you bring on someone who maybe hasn't coached before. Maybe they're doing another career and is interested. And a lot of times too, it's a client that's passionate. I know we've both hired clients in the past, and a couple people on my team still were former clients, and maybe they're paid per client. And so that scale up, like that's slow. Like they're not going to be making full-time money out the gate. We're at a position now where I've actually been able to pay someone full-time out the gate to go through the onboarding process.
Wow.
So the bigger you are, the more you can risk in that regard. And then it can make things more seamless, but ultimately making sure that the margin, the profit margin's there. The other thing is making sure that your packages that you're selling are profitable if you're paying someone else to do them. I think one of the huge mistakes I see people make when they're hiring is everyone talks about like splits. Oh, I'm going to pay them X percent, 50-50, this and that, or 70-30, them 70, me 30. What you really need to think about is, and I might sound like an asshole, but really margin-wise, like you should not pay a coach more than 30% of what the client is worth. The coach should be producing 3x what they're paid, because you have the brand, and that means something. The brand means something. You have the processes to success. You've obviously made this get to a point where you have momentum. And so the goal here is that you're doing all of the marketing, all of the sales, and they're just going to coach, if you do it this way, which I think you should. And then therefore they can generate, they take home about a third of the revenue they produce, which should be enough if they grow to a full-time role. And then you take care of all the things so that they don't have to worry about being an entrepreneur for themselves. And that's why they want to work for you. So those, I guess, long tangent there, but that's what I would look at as gross profit.
That makes a ton of sense. So to me, what I gather from that is like a couple of things. Tell me your thoughts though. Like one, because you need to make enough money, because your margins are a certain amount, you have to assume that, hey, you're going to pay a coach a third of what the revenue they bring in. So you have a definitive value to that coach. Yeah. They can handle X amount of clients and you can charge this much. So they need to get this many people. This is like, there's a finite number attached to the value of that person and what you can pay them. The second thing is the like, before you even go down this process, establish all of the processes you need. So outline exactly what the job is. So SOPs, basically a handbook, instructions, like you need to have everything laid out so that it doesn't have to be perfect, but like, so that you can take someone and say, this is how I want the job done. This is what it is. And the third, and the second point falls into the third, they all kind of come together, is you probably want to look for somebody who is very new, that is highly trainable, because what it does is it reduces the cost of all the other parts.
Yes.
If you have somebody who's brand new to coaching, or maybe they're a client that gets into it, you're not pulling in anybody who has a brand already, or a reputation, or a name, or has spent the time and money to build their name up so they have more value. You can take someone from nothing, you teach them exactly how you want it done so they know no other way. They don't think of it as like, oh, well, I do it this way. There's no argument. You just onboard them your way. Two, the cost to pay them can start low.
It's entry level.
Right.
You're teaching them. Yeah. Part of it is mentorship.
Exactly. And so you build it out that way. So what you're looking for is, once you know you need a coach, look for this kind of person, right?
Interview, and when we go to hire, like there's not a long list. Indeed doesn't have powerlifting. One time I did post on Indeed for powerlifting coaching.
Yeah.
I got like line cooks that were looking to change careers, and I respect the line cooks. You guys do great work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, ultimately, usually when you're hiring, it's someone within your network, your close network already. The other thing that I have really got honed in on, let's say the last year and a half, 2 years, is clear expectations. What does success look like?
Oh, yeah.
How do you rate a coach on how well they're doing?
Yeah.
And these are hard, and I could spend an hour talking to you about this, so I won't take up all that time. But ultimately, if you look at maybe the 3 main things that you do that you would look in the mirror and say, I'm a good coach because I have X results. So whether that's tracking, if you're in barbell sports and competition, it's how many clients do meet preps, competition preps. We track that now as a metric.
Interesting.
We track, compliance rate, how many workouts are being completed by the client for the coach.
Yep.
And even like we use core values to rate as well. Like we have a bunch of core values, and we do like pluses or minuses on quarterly reviews on like how they are aligning with the core values, and each core value is defined. Now, that's a little bit more high level. You don't need core values to bring on your first coach, but these are the things you should probably think about if you're trying to scale long term.
Yeah, nice. That's interesting, because if you imagine like one of the reasons, maybe the reason you would hire a coach is to offload work.
Yeah,
that's probably everybody's first thought.
Make more revenue. Yeah.
So or make more money.
Yeah.
The second thought I'd be like is maybe you're reducing churn.
Yeah.
Right. If you can bring another coach on, you can put some of that work into them, but they can also maybe elevate the quality of the product you deliver, because then you're doing a little bit less. Your work gets better, and then they can also bring in a fresh new perspective. Right.
And passions change.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at my journey. Like when I opened the gym, I was still competing in powerlifting. That was before my first knee surgery, and like. When I opened the gym, again, I just wanted a place where I could train hard and compete and be really good at powerlifting. And then I lost, my ability to compete with my knee stuff, and then I wanted to be the best coach.
Yeah.
And then it got to a point where if I wanted to grow the business, I wasn't the best coach anymore. I actually had a client leave who I really liked, who just told me straight up that I wasn't doing a good job anymore, and like it hurt. But I was like, and I offloaded all of my clients like the next 2 weeks.
Wow.
To other coaches, because I realized that I wasn't doing the best job. And so that allowed me to then focus on the business, which then allowed me to provide opportunities for coaches. So there's a lot of reasons probably why you'd want to bring on a coach. But yeah, first and foremost, it's probably to allow yourself to not have a job within your business.
Yeah.
Or maybe make the work that you're doing more impactful, because coaching brings you enough joy, but then you like, maybe there's more than this.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. I think also, kind of to piggyback on that point too, when you bring on other people, your passion, you like, I imagine a lot of people that are doing this enjoy a challenge.
Yeah.
They enjoy the discovery and the nuance of things. So you bringing on coaches and going down that route allows you to explore that challenge of business building and of being an entrepreneur, but also like it's something where you can start to say, hey, this is the standard, like, let's get there. Yeah. It's like, as a coach yourself, you might be constantly wondering, oh, how do I coach better? How do I do a better job? How do I make them stronger? But now that you're the sort of leader of this, you can sort of direct people in those ways too, and say, hey, let's figure out how to make people better. Like, let's this month or this cycle, like, let's see if we can do a better job than we did last time, right?
Yeah, and the other cool part about the coaching business, like in fitness and barbell sports, is like you're doing a good thing. Yeah. We're not selling like fast food,
right?
We're not selling used cars,
right?
That suck. And so, you can, again, cliche, but like look at it from the lens of I can help more people.
Yeah.
And there are people out there. I look at like some of the team members I have that, frankly, like they've told me this, like there's no way they could have ever had a career doing what they love. My general manager, Alex, who's one of my dearest friends, he's straight up been like, you gave me an opportunity to do what I love to do.
Yeah.
And he sacrificed some other opportunities that he probably would have ended up disliking to do what he loves to do. And he's willing to grind for that. So you're giving people opportunities that you had the know-how, or you were in it at the right time. I look at my stuff and I was like, this is a good right time for me.
Yeah.
To now I can provide opportunities for my team, and that's what drives me, is giving them more opportunities. Now it's what also keeps me up at night when things are slow.
Yeah.
And that's its own conversation, but ultimately, like it becomes a new driver you're providing for people.
Yeah, that's really smart. Yeah.
So what when it came to, for you coaching other coaches, I know you had a lot of experience this, there was Juggernaut coaches, you've coached at Max's gym. Like, what are some of the things that you did right? or even with me, like if you look back on some of the things you did right?
Some of the things I did right, I mean, for sure, just picking the right person, getting the right people. I would say some of the things I've done right in that regard would be like giving people the amount of advice they need, giving people the sort of like the right amount of like boundary. If you give somebody like you're just like dominating everybody, like micromanage them, it's so easy to just make somebody hate that job. If they just know that, oh, he's going to come in and tell me this is wrong or that's wrong, or you're just checked out. We're just like, oh, go ahead and do it. I don't care. Like that, I mean, that's a mistake, but like making sure that you're available to give attention and available to give advice or education when you can, is kind of critical, I think, in that regard.
Yeah, and I think a cadence to that. I mean, I look back at my bringing on people, I would be like, I'd have like impromptu one-on-ones when something needed to be discussed.
Yeah.
And it's usually something negative.
Yeah.
There needs to be like, okay, so I meet with my general manager weekly. We have a same page meeting on Monday. So we run our business on something called EOS. It's Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's based on the book Traction. It's a great book. And so we have a weekly one-on-one that's just like standing, where we throughout the week add issues to what's called an issues list, where we then discuss the issues. And then I meet with my leadership team on Tuesday. Same thing. We have an issues list. We'll discuss issues. And then my coaches meet with our coaching team weekly as well, where we discuss everything that's going right, going wrong. And when you're handling things weekly, meetings with someone weekly, you're reviewing things 52 times a year, and not just monthly, 12 times, or quarterly, 4 times.
Yeah.
You're getting so much more done. So rather than keeping it impromptu and sort of lax, there needs to be some structure with meeting cadence. I don't think it needs to be done weekly, especially when you're first starting. But when you are onboarding someone, a coach, like weekly is probably the move for 12 weeks or 16 weeks. Another key thing here is have a clear onboarding process. So like in our gym, it's like they shadow X amount of sessions, they shadow X amount of consultations. They need to know every facet of how we coach clients before we bring them on. They do mock programs, they read some literature, whatever it is for you as a coach, whatever maybe you found valuable, like make sure that's in some sort of onboarding process where, again, that coach is getting information that you found valuable so they can coach like you. That's something I definitely did right to an extent, but it's gotten better as time has gone on.
Yeah. That's something too that I would say I did not do a great job of in a lot of ways when I started, was not taking ownership of the education, like of the onboarding of them into the process, right? And saying like, well, they're capable, they can write programming, and focusing only on like, are they good coaches, instead of like the entirety of like, how do you interact with a client? What are the expectations of like this person and this person? Are you coming to me when you have problems? Also, to your point, like, are you celebrating victories with them?
Yes.
Are you building a positive relationship with the job they have and working with you? Because if you're just saying like, hey, you're not doing it right, not doing it right, not doing it right, like all they ever think is that they're just failing.
Yeah.
Right? And it's going to be super negative.
And I know I keep bringing up books. I'm a big book guy. I read a book called Radical Candor. It's this idea of being radically candid. And so one of the things there is opening up a two-way communication standard for feedback. So I had my leadership team read this book last year. And what I did was, all right, guys, give me feedback. I'll listen, I'll take it. And I got some criticism.
Yeah.
And the thing is, what I wanted to do there is if I open up a communication valve where they can criticize me and I can take it and handle it well, and then give them solutions that I'm going to be bringing to the table, which is what I did. I can do that for them too.
Yeah.
When you're the boss, a lot of times there's just this top-down leadership model where you're just telling them what to do, you're micromanaging, and you're only meeting with them when something's negative. So every time you're like, hey, can we chat? All of a sudden they have fight or flight response of like, fuck, am I getting fired? What's going on? But if you open up the valve where it's like, no, like, give me feedback, let me know what I can do better, all of a sudden you're a better leader, you're a better boss, a mentor, and that they believe in the process more because they know that they have equal footing with feedback for you too.
Yeah, that's huge. I think I've definitely, over the years of having coaches, work under me or been in that place, like early on made a lot of mistakes, not establishing that kind of pipeline of like, hey, let's work together to get everyone better. And just thinking like, I've got to tell everyone what to do. And then like, again, like you just limit all of your interactions to being criticism or negativity or like, I need this. The other thing is not being clearly defined. Like what is it that I'm trying to get you to do? Like, hey, I need you to do this, or what job? This is the job it's outlined, and like let's measure the standard of that against what we expect it to be. And if you don't have that, you're just like, be a good coach or do the job, and it's not clear because it's all in your head. Like, that's just, you're setting yourself up for failure.
And you'll have some people, like, I think when I worked for you, you could tell me what to do and you knew it would get done fast. And there's people out there that exist. I've had some of those people, I would call them like A players.
Yeah.
So you have some people that can take the chaos and make it organized.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is there's less of those people than there
Oh, yeah.
are that need those clear standards and expectations. I've seen that where I failed my team in clearly defining my expectations based on how I feel that day. I maybe think the gym's dirty in this way or that they did a bad job on this. But it needs to be clearly defined, or else they're constantly guessing what Zach wants, what expectations mean. Again, you'll have some people that just execute and crush it, but even those people that execute and crush it want you to celebrate their wins because they probably care about, honestly, they care less about the money, I'd say, and more about like the sort of accolades and recognition within the business. I call them the intrapreneur. They're entrepreneurial within the business in a sense. They're maybe they're not the owner, but like they take ownership of every facet and care deeply.
That's like, if I was going to say anything, maybe even outside of just a coach, if you're going to hire anybody into your company or bring anyone in, that to me is the most defining characteristic. Outside of like they have a highly specialized skill like a developer or something, is, I mean, if you can find someone who has the skill, the specific skill set and that mentality, this entrepreneur mentality, like that's a winning team. And that's what you should be focused on is pulling that in. And like you said earlier, is like hire slow, fire fast.
Yeah.
Like find that person because they are worth everything you can possibly pay them. Like they will just they will grow everything for you so much more. If you don't have that, if you have somebody where it's like you're having to pull their teeth to get them to do something, you're just like constantly fighting to like get something out of somebody, you know, you can't run a business that way. You need a team of A players. The thing too is that those A players don't want to work with other people that are B and C. They do not want them. And that's good because you want a group that's going to push the people out that aren't going to fit.
Yeah.
Right.
I've dealt with that because, you know, it's tough. Like, you're 100% right. And unfortunately, I've seen I wouldn't say that I've necessarily lost any A players because I've kept maybe C players on too long, but I've seen A players get frustrated and that hurt their amount of work. Because the thing is, if an A player is putting in 10x the work next to a C player, they're going to start to work less or put in less effort because they're like, well, I guess the standard's no longer the standard.
Yeah.
And I'm going to put in less. The other thing with A players that we have to think about is they're always hungry for more.
Yeah.
And so then your job then turns into identifying more opportunities for them to grow. And that's hard because sometimes it's not there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, it's like also like this isn't like these businesses aren't, you know, they're not social
$100 million crazy.
They're not going to be gigantic, right?
Yeah.
They can be big, but like, and they'll be wildly successful for a person who wants to be a powerlifting coach.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not that kind of thing. One thing too is I would say from a leadership standpoint, I'm curious to know your answer.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think is the job, like your role in the broad sense, like as the, you know, sort of like entrepreneur leader of the whole thing?
Yeah. So just to kind of give the audience a little bit more background, like I don't do any coaching anymore.
Yeah.
I'm at this point, I'm really only involved in our weekly leadership meetings, my one-on-ones with my GM, all this stuff. In EOS, the term is visionary. So my job, well, I would say half of my job is getting smarter. I think if you're a founder and there comes a point where you become the bottleneck in the business. And what I realized a couple years back is my knowledge on like business and education or lack thereof was holding us back from growing.
Yeah.
You know, so what I started doing was I joined an entrepreneurship group where there was other sectors represented, not just fitness, where I could take what someone was doing in manufacturing or service, you know, maybe a law firm, and apply it to gym ownership and having a coaching team. So half of my time these days is educating myself, going to conferences, going to presentations, and learning and growing around other entrepreneurs. And I would say 80% of the time, you know, again, we talked in another episode about how 99% of the time is meaningless, but it leads you to the 1% that matters. Maybe 80% of the time I don't have like crazy takeaways, but 20% I have like a key takeaway that changes how I do everything. So that's the main thing. And then painting the vision, the goal. Thing with A players is they like goals.
Yes.
And if you don't have goals, or a mistake I used to make is I would have goals in my head, but I wouldn't communicate them. So how do they know where they're rowing the boat to?
Yeah.
That's the key. So that's what I do now.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the idea, I heard it somewhere before, was it might have been like a Steve Jobs, like your job, your role in the leadership position is to create a shared vision. Is that everybody should understand where you're going, because if you think about it from this perspective, like how are you gonna, as a startup or something, or in a small coaching business, like it's easy to get the first guy because you give them equity or something, or you bring them in this role of like their partners. How are you going to convince the
100th employee?
The 100th employee to join your organization, right? When they could get more money somewhere else. And in coaching, it's a little different, but it's the same thing. It's like, how are you going to convince a really good coach or someone who's a great person who could just start their own coaching business?
Yeah.
How do you convince them to join you, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of it is creating a shared vision, or a vision that is so meaningful that it's like, I have to work there.
For me, it's providing the most value. I'll share a personal story. So I had a coach leave and take a bunch of people about 2 years ago, and it really hurt. Felt betrayed, all those feelings.
Yeah.
I felt I pitied myself. I had that victim mentality, and I started to reflect and reframe it, and I realized that like he left because he felt he was hitting his head on the ceiling of opportunity because I wasn't providing the vision, the roadmap. And frankly, I was super absent. I was traveling and I just was checked out.
Yeah.
I kind of was too egotistical, thought I had the secret sauce and knew everything. And I wasn't putting in the amount of work and effort I probably need to keep putting in to again, further the business. And so what I realized is it's so important I want to provide so much value to my team, my coaches and everyone, that like it would be silly for them to try anything else or go after anything. And not to say that they can't. In fact, if someone really wanted to do their own thing, like I would respect it. Like if he would have told me that he wanted to go off and do his thing, I would have found a way where both of us could walk away whole.
Yeah.
And I would hope that we would still be cool and friends and all that stuff. Like, I know it's easy to say, harder to do, but like that's really what I would have tried. Maybe I would have invested in his business or something like that. I would have totally been open to that. But ultimately, I realized it was my fault. And the thing with owning a business, it's always your fault. Yeah. It's always your fault.
So true.
And you're a firefighter putting out fires every day that probably you started anyway. I saw that on Twitter this morning.
It's true.
But ultimately, yeah. And so I want to bring this conversation, I know we're pretty high level right now. I want to bring it down to being a little bit more tactical for some of the coaches here. So again, with building a coaching team on the tactical side, we talked a little bit about compensation. I don't like splits. So I said 30% or 1/3. That's how I view it from the business owner side.
Yeah.
From the coach's side, it needs to be a dollar amount per client. If you go to a coach and you're recruiting a coach and you say, I'm going to pay you 30%, that kind of sounds shitty.
Yeah.
If you go to a coach and say that, and you tell them I'm going to pay you $80 a client, that's different. Maybe $80 a client for them is freaking solid and they're stoked on that. They probably are, especially if they haven't coached before and you're teaching them. So when it comes to compensation from a gross profit margin side, we do look at it as a fraction or a percentage, but on their end, it's a dollar amount.
Yeah.
That's a big one for me.
I think that's a valuable assessment too, because it's like when you say 30%, they're going to look at it as like, well, I'm losing this much money I could be making, right?
They look at it as Max is taking 70 and he's rolling in the dough and has a Rolls Royce.
He's doing no work. He's done none of this
Yes.
stuff. Yeah.
But in reality, it's like, no, 20% of that goes into rent and 20% of that goes into marketing. I actually one time did a presentation for my coaches where I made a diagram of a person and I showed them like where the percentage of the person goes.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if you actually are transparent and show people. I assume you would be like,
yeah,
here's where the money is going.
And in my leadership team, I share a weekly net profit. They see the negative, like the first week of the month, we have rent and payroll. Like we're always like negative 15 grand.
Yeah.
Because that's like our most expensive week. And it's like, here it is, guys. Like, and they're like, oh shit,
Right.
Profit is now a goal metric for them.
Yeah.
It's shared. So I think at a high level, sharing profit, once you make sure you have your numbers right and all that stuff, sharing profit can be a really good tool. And even profit sharing long-term for your top A players, that your foundational folks, is a good thing. If their job touches profit, if they pull that lever, turn that dial. For someone who's just coaching and just coming on, that might not make sense, but long-term, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good point. It bleeds into that shared vision, right? Mm-hmm. Which is to say, like, everyone's part of this. Everyone understands everyone understands what their value is and what the role they're doing is, you know, so it doesn't have this perception of like a black box. Like I come in, I do this thing, I get this money, and then I look and I'm like, well, I don't know how much he's making. You know, I don't know what's going on. And
They
people
assume.
will always get into that place of like, well, I'm doing all the real work, which is the coaching, when the reality is like there's, you know, probably 80% of the work is outside of the coaching.
Yeah.
Right.
And the risk, you know, as owners, you know, we can say this, and I think most of my team understands like the risks that I've probably taken on and you've taken on personally over the years with, you know, personally guaranteeing your leases and the money that you started with. I mean, I started with not a lot of money going in, but I still reinvested like hundreds of thousands of dollars over the year. I mean, it's probably up to millions of dollars at this point. Yeah. You know, we do over $1 million a year in rev. So yeah, I mean, ultimately, but what I realized is I have to communicate that stuff and kind of paint that picture. The other thing is I look to my GM is kind of he is Zach's translator, where like I'll come in. I used to do what's called organizational whiplash. It's this idea where I would maybe read a book and be like, this is what we got to do. Scrap everything. We're doing this. I'd come in the next day and be like, we're doing this. And then 2 weeks later, I read another book and I'm like, never mind. So what he's had to do is figure out how to like, first of all, tell me to fuck off on that and tell me it's not going to work. And I have to listen to him. And then 2 is translate down to the team what that means and like what's going on. Or if I'm out of the gym, you know, half during the week, like, and I communicate to him and the leadership team, like where I'm at, it's usually furthering my education as a business owner. You know, if someone is like, Zach's never there, he explains, dude, this is what Zach's doing. Like, this is why he's doing this and it's for us. And so finding someone like that, that's like got your back. Yeah. And he also reverberates back, you know, some of the stuff that he hears. You know, one time I came in on a weekly coaches meeting and we always start off with like highlights and lowlights, or personal highlight and professional. And my personal highlight was I had played a golf tournament on the Monday before. Yeah. And I guess it was during a time when everyone was kind of grinding away. I don't know what was going on, but ultimately he pulled me aside later and he's like, dude, like they're here all day, like grinding. And like, you just shared that you like drank and played a golf tournament. I'm like, yeah, fuck that. I played well, but I was like, that probably didn't land how I thought it would, or but it was my highlight. I don't know. So it's,
I was kind of bummed they didn't congratulate me more. It was weird.
Yeah. Oh, good. We're slaving away so Zach can play golf tournaments.
But, this is something I've had to learn. We're probably very similar, like ADD, just like constant, like a million ideas. I've had to learn that when I have an idea or a thought, I'm like, hey, we could build this feature or that, I have to phrase everything as a question. And so it's way better if I ask the question, hey, I read a book. There's this whole different philosophy. What do you think? Do you think any of this is valuable for us to implement? So I do this all the time. Like, hey, I read about this new thing, or I had this idea. Do you think that makes sense? Do you think we could do that at some point? Like, would there be value? And then it turns into a discussion. And it's not the sense, because what I used to do is come in and be like, we got to do this. Oh my God, we got to do this. We got to do that. And then it's like an overwhelming amount of things that like, because when you have somebody who's an A player who's just ready to do whatever it is you ask, like they feel like, oh my God, there's too many things.
They also don't know what to prioritize.
Right, exactly. So it's like you have to be ruthless with the prioritization, but also when I have ideas, they always have to be a question first.
Yeah, I've also like overshared. I overshare way too much. Yeah. And then the other tactical piece I would say that I think is really important is coaches' continued education. Yeah. I think we used to drop the ball there a lot, and that's something we've really honed in. Sebastian is director of coaches education at our gym, and I invest in his knowledge. He takes courses and classes and then brings it down to the coaching team. And so I think there needs to be continued education. What have you seen work, not work, when it comes to continuing to educate coaches long term?
I think the things that don't work is not having a structure. Is like when you have just sort of it's easy to hear a bunch of different things. Like if you go nitty gritty on programs and training, like it's easy to look at like a million YouTube videos and just start to get like Google eyes about like, oh my God, we got to do this and that. And, like everything is wrong. And, it's like we're idiots. Or a new research paper came out, we got to do this thing now. But having a structure to say like, let's address where our deficiencies in coaching. Like what are we not doing, or what are we doing poorly that we could be doing less poorly? Yeah. Like where is it that we're actually like, missing the mark with people, and have KPIs. You have to know, like, if we're just training and people are just working out and that's fine, that's great. Like if you don't track anything, you have no idea. So it would be to say like, establish definitive, like, hey, we're trying to make, if it's powerlifting, like, can we get people 1% stronger? Can we get more consistent in our progress? Are we all making PRs in every training cycle? If not, how do we, find the knowledge we need to get that.
Yeah. The other thing too is like when I started building my coaching team and when I coached, my philosophies were purely based on like yours and Chad's philosophies and stuff like that. And obviously coaching is, and a lot of the data and research has changed so much, you know, and my coaches coach way differently than I used to coach, which is a great thing.
Yeah.
And then the other thing too is having a place where coaches can speak up. Sometimes, you know, and I've had people where when you first start out coaching, you're so, again, dogmatic in your approach because you don't want people to think you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so you're almost like, again, you're like this, it's black and white. Whereas coaching is completely shades of gray, like completely, and different from client to client, coach to coach. And it could probably lead to the same results on how you got there. You know, the process could be different, same results there. But creating a place where coaches can speak up freely and ask for help.
Yeah.
And making that like your culture so that you speaking up and asking for help or, you know, feedback on what you're doing with a client, maybe what's working or what's not, is celebrated rather than criticized in any way. Is really important.
Well, it comes back to that idea of like you're always wrong, just being less wrong.
Yeah.
And when you establish that, everyone understands that everybody's wrong. Yeah. So like there's no more a sense of being criticized for having like I want to know more, I want to do better. Because even if you're the leader and you're in charge, or you're supposed to have the most knowledge because you've been coaching for 20 years or whatever, like if you can say, you know, I don't know the right answer, or I don't know if there is a better answer, but like I'm in the same boat as you, we can figure it out. I have a ton of experience we can draw on, and we can all go and learn something and figure out if there's a better, you know, better process or a better exercise or whatever it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the last couple of pieces on the tactical side, one is as you're bringing on another coach too, as the owner, you should handle all of the let's call it the ancillary tasks that go along with coaching. Again, you're paying someone to coach. A mistake I made was trying to make Swiss Army knife coaches that were just like their own coaches in their own silo. And that created this very like, this silo approach of everyone was just kind of with their coach and had their own experience with that coach, and their experience with that coach could be completely different than someone else training next to them in the gym that's working with some other coach. There should be continuity there.
Yeah.
So it's important to have, again, it could be through community, that's through coaching education, make sure everyone's programming kind of similarly. And then lastly would just be like surveys. So when you hire another coach, you go from knowing every facet of everything that's going on with your clients, and all of a sudden now there's this like gap in communication. You have another coach operating with other clients. Well, how do you gather the feedback from that client? So what we do is we have surveys. I think surveys should be conducted quarterly. You can make them anonymous if you want to, and you survey your clients, your coach's clients, to get really good feedback on how those clients experience how it's going, so that you know what you can improve. I think a lot of times, unfortunately, we're reactive, not proactive with this. So surveys would be proactive. Reactive would be client left. Well, shoot, what happened? And then you conduct an exit interview and you realize your other coach hadn't given feedback for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Oh,
which I'm
100%.
sure you've had experience
Yeah.
with.
I mean, I've done it myself.
Yeah.
That's a huge one, right? Is like it's funny because like the thing that is so extremely like numerically driven and just data driven, which is coaching, which is like barbell sports are literally just numbers on numbers on numbers, right? Is something where it's like, okay, tracking data in a training program is one thing, but like tracking sentiment is hard to do. And like, if you have no understanding of that, your biases will fall into line where it's like, you're going to think about the broad base of athletes you have. Oh, you know, these 10 people are doing well, so everyone's doing well. Well, these other 20 are doing terribly, and they're not happy because you're not giving them feedback. So it's like surveys, I think, are an amazing tool for like giving you actual sentiment. Like, how are people really feeling? Where are we falling apart? Where are they dropping the ball? Where are we doing well, right?
Another probably idea for Coach Logic is one of the questions that we ask on our surveys is program enjoyment.
Yeah.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how much are you enjoying your program? And so we get that feedback. It's in a private Slack channel. And, you know, a lot of times we get like 9 out of 10 but if I get anything less than a 9 and it's like a 7 or an 8, I have one of my team members who's in charge of client success and experience. Ask them how we can get from a 7 to a 10.
That's a
or
great
an 8
question.
to a 10.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Because again, like they'll say that they're getting results, like they're accomplishing their goals, but if their enjoyment is low, again, that's a key indicator proactively of potential churn, right?
Yeah.
And there's probably a fix. Like it might just be swapping one movement they hate out of their block, or just one little thing they have a gripe with. And so it's being proactive about that, because slowly that 8 turns into a 6 3 months later.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, a huge one.
It's also just that mechanism is probably a very positive thing. Yeah. To know that they're going to get a questionnaire or whatever that it comes up, and they can give feedback about their experience with the product they're paying for is huge. If you were able to say, like, I don't enjoy the program, and you don't necessarily know why, at least your coach now has information that, hey, we need to do something to address this.
Yeah.
If you just kind of blindly go along with it, like that's, then you again, it's like, every time you do something that the person has no outlet to let that steam out and say something, it just builds this pressure up, so that when a better opportunity comes along, they just quit. They move along.
And the other thing, and we were joking about this earlier, like the Planet Fitness model, coaching is expensive enough where they're deciding monthly probably whether or not they're going to stay on. Because it's usually $200 to $300, maybe even more if they're getting nutrition as well. And so that's a monthly expense where they're constantly thinking, do I keep this or not? It's not $10 a month. It's not a drop in the bucket. And so you're constantly being reviewed. It's not like all of a sudden you've kept a client for 12 months and then you're like, all right, well, I got them to 12 months. Now they're going to stay for 3 years. There may be data to support that. Like, I know if a client stays for 6 months, they're likely to stay for 18.
Yeah.
And you can kind of get into the data like that. But ultimately, you're constantly being reviewed from an expense standpoint. If there's any financial hardship, there's a lot of that going on right now. Their job gets cut. You're a luxury expense. You're a luxury service. They're going to pay you last before they pay rent and food.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. So
100%. True. So yeah, man, I mean, ultimately I think building a coaching team can lead a lot of people, to success. It allows you to take your passions like to the next step. And I think with, utilizing the Coach Logic platform, I'm super excited because I think it'll increase our client retention and program enjoyment from our clients, and give them, a space where they can really dive deeper into their training. But ultimately, I think if our listeners follow like the steps that we outlined here, I think they'd see a lot of success.
100%. I have one last question.
Yeah.
When would you advise somebody to not bring on another coach? Like, you have somebody who's got maybe 60 athletes, 65, they're doing that. When would you say I don't think it's the right move, or I don't think that this is a good idea?
I'd say 2 things. One's easy. If your vision isn't to lead a team,
right?
There is nothing wrong. Again, I think entrepreneurship is like fetishized in our today's society. Yeah. Like, it's like everyone should do it, and like, again, it's so difficult.
Painful.
It's painful, and if you don't fucking love it, like, you're not going to stay on it. So just avoid it. So know that it has to be your vision. You have to be so passionate that you're going to be willing to like bleed for it, because you will. Yeah. It'll suck. It'll hurt. And then 2, I would say, if someone has 60 clients and let's say their price point is like far too low. So like, if you have 60 clients, but you've been undercharging, and that's why you've been able to maybe get that volume, you don't have the gross profit margin to hire a coach that will have a livable wage. All of a sudden, then you'll have to raise prices later. So you might as well, if you're listening to this and you coach 15 clients, this is a perfect time to potentially change price.
Right.
Like, look at your competitors, look at the service you're providing. I always try to, like, SoCal Powerlifting, I say that we're the Equinox of powerlifting.
Right.
We're the nice gym. We're not the grungy, gross West Side barbell gym, chest hair and tattoos and nipple piercings.
Yeah.
And so I would rather be the price leader than some sort of follower. There's nothing wrong with being the cheaper average Joe, whatever, like that. There's a space for that. So ensuring that there's enough margin to then pay someone to scale. If your pricing isn't competitive, you won't be able to scale. You won't have enough cash left in the business to let it eat and grow.
Yeah. It's also a good point. Like, just one quick thing to add, that if you're working towards increasing your pricing, you can do a better job with everybody, and it justifies that price a lot easier. If you're trying to get to, let's say, a revenue of, $10K a month, like at $100 a month, it's 100 clients. Like, that's not happening. Yeah. You're not coaching 100 people a month. Yeah. So if you bring that, you double that to 200, now you've got 50. That's still a challenge. If you can get your pricing up to $250 a month and deliver a better product, you've got a lot less people, right? And so it's like moving that needle towards higher pricing, I think is a really valuable lever to pull. And it makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways, because you're also moving yourself out of that spectrum of like, the person who's going to pay $100, They might be stretching to 100. They might be a college kid. They might be a
Yes.
high school kid. $200, same stretch, but a different level of person. 250, 300, 400. It's less and less impactful. I have people that pay, normal price, but to them, it's just because they're hiring me. It's like nothing. It means nothing to them. Same amount of money to somebody else is very different.
Yes. You've ever seen that meme where it's like you have the $10 million CEO and maybe your product is $1,000 and they're like, all right, here's the credit card, run it. And then you have the, $1,000 CEO. They're like, well, what exactly are the services that I'm getting? Because for them, this is a massive investment.
Yeah.
And that's why I could talk to this all day, but like college kids and marketing to those people who are in these transitory periods of life is like not good.
Yeah.
They don't stay. And so again, another thing would be who your market is will dictate the volatility of your business.
Yeah.
That's why we, with all of our paid advertising and stuff like that, we focus on people who are established working professionals.
Yes.
We don't want people in those transition periods of life. It can be hard to not want to maybe do lower ticket offers and try and get little bits of revenue here and there because, again, it can be a shiny object.
Yeah.
But it's a distraction from the main
100%.
thing. And those high ticket clients don't want to be around the messy college kid stuff all over the place, not taking ownership of the space. I had that. I actually raised our drop-in price from $20 to $30 to prevent crazy people from coming in and leaving the space all distraught, because I had some really good clients complain and be like, dude, this place gets overrun with some of the local, the college kids locally. And, but that drop in revenue doesn't really mean much. It's the person paying the premium subscription matters more.
Yeah. And it goes a lot towards a shared vision. It goes towards a vision, right? Like, what are you trying to do? If your goal is to elevate the fitness or the strength or, improve the powerlifting of as many people as you can, as long as you can, the things that are going to facilitate that are adherence to the program.
Yes.
If people are dropping off because they can't pay or it's too expensive, or people are quitting because there's too many people that are, irritating them in the gym, fix that model, right? Because that's not in alignment with your vision.
Yeah. So I'd say the keys here are ultimately it's have a good onboarding process, ensure that you have a good enough profit margin. And when you raise prices, you got to think too, that drops right to the bottom line. So it's not like you're going to raise by $50 and then go spend $50 a month per client somewhere else. It's straight net profit. And then ultimately making sure that it aligns with your long-term vision. Don't just do it because that's what everyone else is doing. Do it because that's what you want to do. And then you'll be the best leader you can be for your business.